Jacob Miller woke to the rhythmic thud of drums vibrating through the morning air. He stumbled out of his rickety lean-to, blinking against the dawn, and froze. 30 warriors, their faces streaked with war paint, stood in a silent circle around his home. They did not move. They did not speak. Their eyes locked on him, sharp and unreadable, like they knew something he did not. Just yesterday, he was a nobody, an orphan scraping by, cleaning horse stalls for crusts of bread. Now, the fiercest tribe in the region had surrounded his shack like a living fortress. How did helping one lost elder turn his world upside down? If you are watching this on your screen, take a second to grab your phone and hit follow or share. That one click keeps stories like this alive. The day before, Jacob had been trudging along the riverbank, eyes scanning the mud for anything valuable the spring floods might have left behind. A faint moan stopped him cold, drifting from the willows lining the water. Most folks in Pine Valley would have kept walking. Getting mixed up with native troubles was a quick way to end up dead. But that sound hit Jacob somewhere deep, where the ache of losing his family still lingered. He pushed through tangled branches until he found her, an old native woman, crumpled against a tree root, her leg twisted at a bad angle. Her buckskin dress was soaked, torn at the hem, and her silver hair was matted with river mud. Blood trickled from a cut above her eye. She looked up at him, her gaze fierce despite her pain, and Jacob felt his chest tighten. She was someone's family, and she was alone. As Jacob knelt beside the old woman, a sharp crack of twigs snapped his attention to the river's edge. A lone crow, its feathers glinting black, perched on a low branch, watching them with unsettling focus. Lila's eyes followed the bird, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Bad sign," she muttered, her voice barely audible over the river's rush. Jacob frowned, unsure if she meant the crow or something worse. Before he could ask, she gripped his wrist, her fingers surprisingly strong. "No time. They come soon." Her urgency sent a chill through him. He glanced around, half expecting shadows to leap from the trees. The crow took flight, its caw echoing like a warning. Jacob's pulse quickened, but he kept his voice steady. "Who's coming, Lila?" She only shook her head, her eyes darting to the horizon. The woman flinched as Jacob stepped closer, her hands scrabbling in the dirt like she might bolt. He raised his palms, keeping his voice low. "I am not here to hurt you. Can you walk?" Her breathing was ragged, but she studied him, her eyes narrowing. In halting English, she said, "Help. Family lost. River took them." Jacob's stomach knotted. He knew what it was to be lost, to have no one left. "Where is your family?" he asked. She pointed upstream, toward the jagged peaks in the distance, her hands trembling. "Storm came. I fell, cannot find them." Every instinct told Jacob to walk away. Helping her would paint a target on his back. Folks like Thomas Reed, the town's loudmouth bully, already called him worthless stray. This would give them a reason to do more than talk. Jacob scanned the riverbank, his heart pounding as he helped Lila to her feet. A faint glint caught his eye, a small, carved bone pendant half buried in the mud. He bent to pick it up, its intricate markings unfamiliar but heavy with meaning. Lila's breath caught, and she reached for it, her fingers trembling. "My son's," she whispered, clutching it to her chest. Her eyes filled with tears, but she straightened, as if the pendant gave her strength. He dropped it to mark his path. Jacob nodded, tucking the discovery into his mind. If her son had left this, he was close and searching. But so were others, and the pendant meant someone else might find them first. Jacob's grip tightened on Lila's arm. "We need to move," he said, his voice firm despite the fear creeping up his spine. But Jacob could not look away from her eyes. They held the same hollow fear he had felt at 10, standing over his parents' graves with nowhere to go. "What is your name?" he asked, crouching beside her. "Lila," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I am Jacob. We are going to get you home." As he helped her stand, her weight heavy on his arm, he missed the shadow watching from the bluff above. Thomas Reed, his face twisted with spite, was already plotting how to turn this act of kindness into Jacob's ruin. The sky darkened with gathering clouds, a warning of the trouble brewing in Pine Valley. Jacob's only thought was keeping Lila safe, even if it meant crossing land where settlers and natives killed without asking questions. Halfway to his lean-to, Jacob froze as a low whistle cut through the air. Lila stiffened, her eyes darting to a cluster of rocks by the river. A young boy, no older than 12, peeked out, his face smeared with dirt and fear. He wore the same style of buckskin as Lila, but his eyes were wide with panic. "Lila," he hissed, his voice barely carrying. She gasped, limping toward him. But Jacob held her back, scanning for danger. "Your kin?" he asked. She nodded, tears spilling over. "My grandson, Cale." The boy darted to them, clinging to Lila's side. "They took the others," he whispered, his voice shaking. "I hid." Jacob's jaw tightened. Whoever they were close, and now he had two people to protect. He crouched to Cale's level. "Stay close, kid. We are not out of this yet." Jacob guided Lila and Cale toward his lean-to behind the livery stable, her injured leg dragging with every step. She bit back a grimace, her pride stronger than her pain. It reminded Jacob of a coyote had once seen, limping but defiant. "We need to fix that cut," he said, easing her onto a crate inside his cramped shelter. The place was bare, just a straw pallet, a cracked bucket, and a single tin cup. It was not much, but it was dry, and that was enough for now. Lila's eyes swept the room, then settled on him. "You live here? No kin?" Jacob nodded, fetching water from the pump outside. "Lost my folks to sickness when I was a kid. Town puts up with me, but that is about it." Cale hovered near Lila, his small hands clutching a slingshot like it was a lifeline. Jacob noticed the boy's fingers trembling, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the room for threats. "You fight?" Cale asked, his voice low but direct. Jacob paused, surprised by the question. "If I have to," he said, dipping a cloth in water. Cale's gaze lingered, weighing Jacob's words. Lila touched her grandson's shoulder, murmuring something in their language. The boy relaxed slightly but kept his slingshot ready. Jacob felt a pang of admiration. This kid, barely old enough to carry a weapon, was ready to stand his ground. It made Jacob's own resolve harden. He would not let these two down, no matter what came next. Something softened in Lila's face, like she recognized the weight of his words. As Jacob cleaned the gash on her forehead, she stayed still, though her jaw tightened with each touch. "Your family," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "How many? Where were they going?" Lila's fingers twitched, counting. "Maybe 12. My son leads us. He is headman. We were traveling to trade with a settlement up north. Storm hit fast. River swept me away." Jacob's heart sank. If her son was a chief, her absence would not go unnoticed. Her people would be searching, and search parties meant armed warriors ready to assume the worst if they found her with a white boy. As Jacob bandaged Lila's wound, a sharp clatter outside made Cale jump to his feet, slingshot raised. Jacob motioned for silence, creeping to the window. A stray dog, skinny and mangy, had knocked over a bucket by the stable, but the noise had drawn eyes. Two men from town, loitering near the livery, were now looking his way. One pointed, muttering to the other, and Jacob recognized the glint of suspicion in their stares. They were Thomas Reed's lackeys, always eager to stir trouble. "Stay down," Jacob whispered to Lila and Cale. The men lingered, their voices low but carrying words like natives and trouble. Jacob's stomach twisted. If they came closer, they would see Lila's buckskin dress through the gaps in the boards. He needed to act fast. "How long have you been out here?" Jacob asked. Lila held up 2 fingers. 2 days. His mind spun. By now, her tribe would be scouring the land. Thomas Reed would stir up trouble, whispering about native raids to anyone who would listen. Fear spread fast in Pine Valley, and fear made people dangerous. A sharp knock at the door made them all freeze. Jacob signaled for Lila to stay quiet as boots crunched outside. Through the warped boards of his window, he saw Thomas Reed's grizzled face, peering in with a smirk. "Open the door, kid," Thomas barked. "Got some questions for you." Jacob's pulse pounded. If Thomas found Lila, he would drag her to town as proof of some made-up plot. Jacob's hands shook as he pressed himself against the wall, shielding Lila and Cale. Thomas's knocks grew louder, each one a hammer against Jacob's nerves. Cale's small hand slipped into his, squeezing tight, and Jacob saw the boy's lips move silently, as if praying. Lila's eyes met Jacob's, calm but urgent. "He knows," she whispered, barely audible. Jacob's heart sank. Thomas must have seen them at the river, piecing together enough to cause trouble. Outside, Thomas's voice turned mocking. "Hiding something, boy? Better come clean before I fetch the sheriff." Jacob clenched his fists, forcing his voice steady. "Just waking up. Mr. Reed, give me a minute." But the lie felt thin, and the air grew heavier with every second. "What do you want, Mr. Reed?" Jacob called, stepping in front of Lila to block Thomas's view. "Saw you by the river earlier," Thomas said, his voice heavy with suspicion. "You see any natives skulking around?" Lila's breath hitched, and she pointed toward the window. 3 figures stood outside, their faces smeared with red and black paint. These were not her people. Their movements were too sharp, too predatory. Jacob's blood ran cold. "Lila," he whispered. "Who are they?" Her voice was a faint hiss. "Bad men. Steal women. Kill families. Not my tribe." Thomas pounded on the door again. "Open up, or I am coming in." The sight of the enemy warriors sent KL scrambling under the pallet, his slingshot clutched to his chest. Jacob's mind raced, calculating their odds. 3 armed men outside, Thomas at the door, and a town ready to believe the worst. He glanced at Lila, her face set with determination despite the fear in her eyes. She reached into her dress, pulling out a small, sharp flint blade, no longer than her palm. "For KL," she said, pressing it into Jacob's hand. The gesture hit him hard, her trust in him to protect her grandson. He nodded, tucking the blade into his belt. "We get out of this," he said, "together." Lila's faint smile was all the answer he needed. Jacob's mind raced. Thomas at the door, ready to turn Lila over to a mob, enemy warriors outside, waiting to snatch her for their own purposes. And him, a 16-year-old with nothing but a dull knife and a stubborn streak. "Mr. Reed," he shouted, "buying time. I am not decent. Hold on a second." The warriors outside had spotted Thomas and were slipping back into the shadows, but Jacob could feel their presence, like wolves circling a campfire. Lila tugged his arm, her eyes wide with a desperate idea. "Back window," she whispered. "Run to river. I know a place to hide." Jacob hesitated. Running meant gambling everything on outpacing men who knew the land better than he did. As Jacob weighed their chances, a low growl rumbled from the shadows outside. The stray dog from earlier stood at the edge of the lean-to, its hackles raised, teeth bared at the unseen warriors. Its sudden bark split the air, and Jacob saw one of the painted figures flinch, his spear shifting. The noise gave Jacob a spark of hope. "That dog's drawing attention," he whispered to Lila. "Might buy us time." She nodded, her eyes flicking to Cale, who peeked out from under the pallet. Jacob motioned for the boy to stay low, then crept to the back window, checking for movement. The dog's growling grew fiercer, and a shout from one of Thomas's lackeys rang out. "Something's out there." Chaos was their only ally now, but Lila's gaze held steady, and he saw something he had never had: someone who believed in him. "Okay," he said. "We stick together." Thomas's voice roared again. "You are done stalling, kid." Jacob grabbed his knife and a small sack with his only keepsakes, a faded tintype of his parents and a single coin. Lila pushed through the back window, her movements quick despite her limp. Jacob helped Cale through, then followed, landing softly on the grass. They bolted for the river, Lila's injured legs slowing them, but her grit kept her moving. Behind them, Thomas's shouts mixed with the crack of wood as he forced his way into the lean-to. The river's edge was in sight when Cale stumbled, his foot catching on a root. Jacob caught him before he hit the ground, but the delay cost them. The 3 enemy warriors stepped from the brush, their weapons gleaming in the fading light. Lila's face drained of color, but she pushed Cale behind her, her small blade raised. Jacob stood beside her, his own knife ready, though his hands shook. The lead warrior smirked, his eyes flicking to Cale. "The boy comes with us," he said in broken English, his voice cold. Lila's jaw tightened, and she spat a single word in her language, sharp and defiant. The warrior's smirk vanished, replaced by a scowl. Jacob's heart raced. This was no bluff, and they were out of time. The river was close, but not close enough. 3 painted warriors stepped from the brush, blocking their path. Their eyes glinted with purpose, and Jacob knew they had been waiting. Lila's hand found his, her fingers icy but firm. "Thank you," she whispered, "for trying." Before Jacob could answer, a deep horn sounded across the valley, answered by shouts from the hills above. Lila's people had found them, but would they reach the river in time, Or would they arrive to find only blood and regret? The enemy warriors raised their weapons, and Thomas's footsteps crashed closer. But the horn's call grew louder, shaking the ground like a promise. As the horn's echo faded, a scream tore through the air, not from Lila or KL, but from one of Thomas's lackeys, now sprinting from the trees. "They're here," he yelled, his voice cracking with panic. Jacob spun, expecting Lila's people, but instead saw a fourth warrior, his face unpainted but his eyes wild with desperation. He wore tattered buckskin, and his arm bled from a fresh wound. "Lila!" he gasped, collapsing near them. Lila's eyes widened. "Torin!" she cried, recognizing her nephew. The enemy warriors hesitated, thrown off by the new arrival. Jacob seized the moment, pulling Lila and Kale toward a cluster of boulders for cover. Torin's arrival had shifted the odds, but not enough. They were still trapped. The horn's echo seemed to ripple through the trees. The three enemy warriors hesitated, their painted faces turning toward the hills where more calls answered, sharp and urgent. Lila's grip on Jacob's hand tightened, a spark of hope in her eyes. "My son," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. But the enemy warriors did not back off. Their leader, a wiry man with scars crisscrossing his arms, barked something in a harsh tongue. Lila's face paled as she translated. "They say better to take me now than face my son's war party." Thomas Reed burst through the bushes, his face flushed with anger. He stopped short when he saw the warriors, his hand twitching toward the revolver at his belt. Torin struggled to his feet, his wounded arm hanging limp. He spoke rapidly to Lila, his words too fast for Jacob to catch, but the urgency was clear. Lila's face hardened, and she turned to Jacob. "He says my son's warriors are close, but these men," she nodded toward the enemy warriors, "plan to kill us before they arrive." Jacob's grip on his knife tightened. He glanced at Kale, who clutched his slingshot, his small face set with determination. The boy's courage sparked something in Jacob, a refusal to let fear win. He pointed to a narrow gap between the boulders. "If we can get there, we hold them off until help comes." Lila nodded, her eyes fierce. They moved as one, Torin limping behind, ready to face whatever came next. "Lord Almighty," Thomas muttered, his bravado faltering. The scarred warrior turned, sizing up Thomas as an easier mark. In a blur, he threw a hatchet, the blade whistling past Thomas's shoulder and sinking into a tree. Thomas stumbled back, cursing. "Stay close," Jacob told Lila, gripping his knife, though he knew it was no match for men who lived by the blade. Then an arrow sliced through the air, striking the scarred warrior in the thigh. He staggered, roaring in pain. From the ridge above, a figure appeared, Lila's son, his silhouette commanding against the sky. Behind him, a dozen mounted warriors descended, their horses moving with lethal precision. The enemy warriors realized their mistake too late. Outnumbered, they turned to flee toward the river, but Lila's people were faster, cutting off every path. The fight was quick and brutal, a clash of steel and shouts that left two enemies dead and their leader bound. Thomas Reed had vanished at the first sign of blood, his footsteps fading into the brush. Lila's son dismounted near the riverbank, his presence heavy as he approached Jacob and Lila. He was not tall, but his eyes carried the weight of a man who had seen too much. Lila limped to him, speaking rapidly in her language, her hands gesturing toward Jacob. As the chief approached, Jacob noticed Kale slip the bone pendant into his pocket, his small hands steady now. The boy's eyes met Jacob's, and he gave a quick nod, as if sealing a silent pact. Lila's son stopped in front of Jacob, his gaze steady but warm. "My mother speaks of your courage," he said, his English slow but clear. "You protected my family when you had no reason to." Jacob's throat tightened. They needed help. That is all. The chief's hand rested briefly on Kyle's shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the boy's bravery. Then he turned back to Jacob. "You are not alone anymore," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a vow. Jacob felt something shift inside him, a spark of belonging he had not known since childhood. The chief listened, his gaze fixed on Jacob, unreadable. When Lila finished, he spoke, his English careful but clear. "My mother says you saved her, that you helped when others would have run." Jacob swallowed, his throat dry. "She was hurt. I could not leave her." A faint smile touched the chief's lips. "You risked everything for a stranger." Before Jacob could respond, a warrior approached, speaking urgently. The chief's face darkened, and he turned back to Jacob. "Your town is stirring. A man named Reed claims you plotted with enemies to kidnap my mother. They call you a traitor." Jacob's stomach dropped. He had done everything right, saved Lila, found her people, and still, he was the villain. "What will you do now?" the chief asked. "Your people want you dead. Mine see you as kin." Jacob stared at the ground, the weight of his choices pressing down. Go back to Pine Valley and face Thomas's lies? Or vanish into the wild with no home, no future? Either way, he was alone. "I do not know," he said, his voice barely audible. The chief studied him, then spoke to Lila. She nodded, her eyes bright as she addressed the warriors gathered around. The warriors listened, their stern faces softening as Lila spoke. The chief translated, "She tells them how you put her life before your own. How you stood against a mob and enemy warriors for someone you did not know." Jacob shook his head. "I am no hero. I just could not walk away." The chief's eyes held his. "That is what makes you one." He stepped forward, placing a hand on Jacob's shoulder. "In our tribe, saving the life of a chief's mother makes you family. You are my brother now, if you choose it. And my brothers are guarded by the strength of our people." Jacob's heart pounded. Family. A word he had not dared to hope for since he was a boy. Lila smiled, repeating her son's words to the warriors. Their nods were not pity or obligation but respect, the kind Jacob had never known. "What about Pine Valley?" he asked. "Thomas Reed will not stop." The chief's smile was cold. "Reed will learn what happens when lies meet truth. Tonight, my warriors will visit your town. They will make it clear that you are under our protection. Any harm to you is war with us." Jacob blinked. "You would do that? For me?" The chief's laugh was deep. "You saved my mother. I save you. That is our way." Before the warriors could depart, a low murmur spread among them. One of the younger men stepped forward, holding a tattered piece of cloth stained with blood. He spoke quickly, his eyes flicking to Jacob. Lila's face tightened as she translated. "They found this near the river, a scout's signal from our enemies. More are coming." The chief's jaw set, and he gave a sharp order. The warriors moved instantly, forming a protective ring around Jacob, Lila, and KL. Jacob's chest tightened. He had thought the danger was over, but now a larger threat loomed. The chief's eyes met his. "You stay with us now," he said. "No one touches my family." Jacob nodded, gripping Kyle's shoulder, ready to face whatever came next. The next morning, Jacob woke in his lean-to to a sound he would never forget: 30 warriors standing watch outside, their silence louder than any threat. Thomas Reed and his cronies had come before dawn, likely planning to haul Jacob out and make an example of him. But they found a wall of warriors, their painted faces unyielding. Through his window, Jacob saw Thomas retreat, his face ashen, realizing the orphan he had mocked was now untouchable. Lila appeared at his door, no longer the frail elder from the river, but a woman with quiet strength. "My son says you can stay here or join us. Either way, you are ours." As the sun rose higher, a single warrior approached Jacob, holding a small woven bracelet. He pressed it into Jacob's hand without a word, his eyes steady with respect. Lila explained, "It is a mark of our tribe. Wear it, and all will know you are one of us." Jacob slipped it onto his wrist, the weight of it grounding him. For the first time, he felt anchored, not adrift. Kale watched, his slingshot tucked away, and gave Jacob a small, proud smile. The warriors around them stood taller, their presence a shield against the world. Jacob's throat tightened, but he managed a nod. He was no longer the boy Pine Valley ignored. He was part of something bigger, something worth fighting for. Jacob looked at the warriors, men who had stood through the night for a kid they barely knew, because honor demanded it. For 16 years, he had been a shadow, belonging to no one. Now, because he chose kindness over fear, he had found something rarer than gold: a family willing to face a whole territory to keep him safe. "Tell your son," Jacob said, his voice firm. "I want to learn your ways. But first, I want to help make sure no other lost soul goes without someone to find them." The chief's plan had worked. Jacob Miller was no longer just an orphan. He was family. And in a land where family was everything, that changed it all. The warriors stayed until dusk, a living testament that some ties run deeper than blood. Courage, when seen by the right people, could turn a nobody into someone protected by an entire tribe. If you are watching this, grab your phone and hit like or share. It is a small thing, but it helps us keep telling stories that show what it means to find a place to belong.